From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your Professional Misfits. On episode 1 today, ladies and gentlemen, we're discussing what is the importance of work? What is the value? What is the role of work? So we're not easing in light and easy, Brody. We're kicking off with the heavy hitters for episode number 1. So we have a bit, for those of you who don't know, Brody and I met on LinkedIn, so professional network, professional space, and we got really kind of disillusioned and fed up with the hype and the facade. And especially in times that we're living in now, we wanted to have a deeper discussion on the value and the purpose of work. Like, what is its role historically? Is the purpose of work to find your identity? Is it to earn a wage? And these are the conversations we were looking forward to having. So, Brady, I guess I'll push you under the bus early, my man, because we both had a bit of a checkered history and career up until now. We talked about it a little bit in the pilot, but I guess as an overview, what's your relationship with what you do now and your work and where you're going and where you want to be?
That was an interesting way to phrase that.
I know, right? It's easy softball questions to start.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
How's the weather?
Yeah. Okay. Well, here we go. So, I'd say.
What do you do right now? What do you do right now with the folks at home?
Yeah. So I'm head of marketing for a branding agency right now, and we do all sorts.
Congratulations, because I know you just landed that job.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And there's a whole scope of projects that go on there, whether it's content creation or strategy or things like that. And it's interesting because if you would have asked me 5 years ago when I was working a standard 9 to 5, and what I was getting value from that, I wouldn't have had any identification with it. I wouldn't have even understood really the question that you were posing. You know what I mean? Because to me, and realistically, my career path, wasn't laid out flat and solid until probably the last 5. And
really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I've been doing this for 8, but the first 3, it was kind of just like doing it by accident kind of thing. You know what I mean? And
yeah, especially sorry to interrupt, the social media space, especially you could argue that it's not really been a professional, viable industry.
No,
until maybe the last 5, maybe 10. But it definitely wasn't something. I'll draw a comparison actually. Social media in general, like Facebook and Instagram, was where TikTok is now, where everyone's the kids are using it, and you can sort of see value, but no one's but is it really a thing? And so superficial. People didn't realize you're gonna build brands, you're gonna build marketing around this thing. So that's been your jam for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, and before then, like I said, you would have asked me that question, do you find value in your work? I would have been like, I don't even understand what you mean, and now it's just, work is work. I got to go do what I got to do. And, and the last 5 has really put it into perspective that I don't think I could stop doing what I'm doing now and go back at all. I think even if shit hit the fan, it would be hard for me to be like, okay, I'm going to go buckle into something that I know is nowhere near aligned with that.
Go back to retail.
Yeah, good God, no, bro. That would hurt so bad. And I'm not discriminating against retail.
No,
but it's just me. It's like we're talking about that value. I found it, that passion. And to me right now, what it means is, is there something within me that not only I enjoy when I'm doing my work, but again, circling back to value, do I find value in it? And I'm constantly learning with marketing. I'm learning about
Yeah.
people, I'm learning about psychology, I'm learning about trends, I'm all sorts of things, and if you had to pick me apart, one of my favorite things in life is learning. So, what a
Yeah, that's a good
wonderful
point.
field to fall into, where things are constantly changing, always moving, always growing. Yeah, go ahead.
That's it. No, it's a really really interesting point because I was going to dial it way back, I suppose, to you know we leave school,
Hmm.
right, and passively we sort of understand that school is to skill us and educate us for work and life.
Right.
Some of us might go on to university and college and things like that, but either way, the timeline is like you leave school, you get a job,
Hmm.
right? You have to
Hmm.
work.
Hmm.
Um, and so trying to pitch, what you want, what you want and what you can get, like that's two very different things. And, you and I, probably me more so, like coming from an arts background, like what I want is not what I can get, so I've got to make do until I can, or side hustle or yeah, find a way to kind of keep the flame burning in the meantime. So if we're sort of delving into the question of like what is work and how does it sort of fit our values and personality, there's an older, our like our father's generation, let's say, it's like, well, you have to shape yourself to do the job, because you have responsibilities.
Right.
You got family, you've got
Hmm.
like whatever, or like it's obviously a sort of cornerstone of being a man in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? It's like what you do defines you, whether that's career or craft. Um, yeah. So it's. Do you think? Because I mean, I've got a little bit of background. Like you've gone from working in a cannery in a warehouse to being, rodeo cowboy to, doing all sorts of things. But it's. Would you find there's a like a consistent thread in your journey to where you are now? Because what I picked up on what you were talking about was like you, if you're in a field where you love learning and you can actually apply your curiosity and your skills to get better at what you do, like that's the juice you want to hang on to. And so if you can find that in any role, I think, whether you're 20 or 50, like that's a pretty solid guiding light.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I question if it was like, am I interested in it this way because it keeps me engaged,
Yeah.
and that's the cycle that I'm in, and that's why it's so appealing. And that I think that's a big part of it. But it's like you said, the common thread though is like, and you nailed it on the head, is that I can take what I'm learning and apply the curiosity almost in everything that I've done. It's,
Right.
that's where I've found the most passion in those things. It just seems to be with marketing because how it's so often in flux that
Yeah, right.
you're constantly learning. I've never had that lull where I'm like, okay, I've mastered this, I'm bored, I want to
It's
leave.
it's a growth industry, as they would
Right,
say.
right, and yeah, it's really just kept me anchored in that part of myself.
It's interesting because I compare it to kids who aren't us, right? Like I've got my local cafe run by like Tom and his brother, and Tom's got a nephew, Giovanni. So like totally cool Italian cafe, little neighborhood joint. And Gio, I swear, like is come straight out of high school, probably left at 15, 16, went to work in his dad's cafe, now works with his dad and his uncle at their cafe. He's just gotten married. He's 27, 28. Um, and I kind of look at him and go, man, are you going to do this for the rest of your life? Or like, what else have you got going on? Or like, what do you want to do? So, and I ask that with compassion because I've done my hospo time. You know what I mean? My nickname was Coffee Boy for like a very long time. Um, but I was always sort of hustling for me anyway. I was sort of hustling for something else. But for other people, who aren't, say, the artist kids, they've got different goals, different ambitions. Probably don't care. Like I'm happy if I've just got like a bit of change in my pocket. I can buy a house or like buy a car, take my girl out, pay rent, get drinks on the weekend.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well, I mean, I think the question around purpose and value and passion has really been raised in at least the last 3 years, especially with COVID,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because the people that had to adapt and show up, were like, holy shit, this is not worth it. You know what I mean? Oh my God, they don't care about my life. They don't care about, what I've got going on. This is just like you
Yeah.
said, I'm going to foot the bills. I'm going to take care of business on the top. And, yeah, where's the value in that, right? And a lot of times too, even if it's something that you enjoy, where it's like, slang in coffee or slang in retail, it's like there's still, a time that you ask yourself, like you said with your friend, is this what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? And if that question, I think, makes you uncomfortable, then you should definitely take a deeper look. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are scared to, because
Yeah.
because you still have to foot the bills, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, do you have the bandwidth and the grit to take care of both? Is really what the
Mm.
question should be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And especially in recent times, like to your point, like COVID, like flipped the table for everyone. And then, and it wasn't one event. That's the other thing. It's been consistent since then because organizations then like mass hired back
Hmm.
in a
Hmm.
rush.
Yeah.
And then there was that year of, well, no one wants to work now. This sucks because no one wants to come back in the office.
Right.
And now it's swung back the other way because now they're laying off everyone they've hired because the recession is sticking around, right?
Yeah.
So if you didn't learn the first time during COVID, you should definitely be like reevaluating now.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, not to labor the point, but it's like disruptions aren't new. They've always been around. They're not going to go away. So learning how to cope with them and sort of maintain some values and some ethic and some character in the midst of it, is what's going to serve you better than clinging to a job title. But I suppose to that point, it's easy to say, and there's like even artists like us, like you take pride in the fact that well, I'm an actor. You wear that mantle. So if someone then came to me and said, "You will never be on stage again," or "You can never go in front of camera again," right? Go in front of camera again. If you have a life purpose and a drive and a passion, and it gets taken away from you, which like some people might have had that in their careers or even in their education or even trying to make it work. You want to get that role. You want to be where you are now, Brody. Like I want to work for the marketing agency and design cool campaigns and, go viral. That guaranteed, there's a million billion people in the audience, between 20 and 30 who are like, man, I'd kill for that,
Right.
to do that all day. And they can't. So let's have that discussion around how do we, it's uncomfortable. Let's have a discussion around, how do we navigate this mess?
Well,
Right?
I mean, I'm going to be dead ass honest with you. You just raised the question for me, because, well, you did. You put it into
Like
perspective that, like,
existential life crisis.
I think you saw it in my eyes.
Episode 1. We're barely 10 minutes in. Sorry, folks.
You just cracked my psyche. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Look, I'll go first with a personal story. I guess the reason this comes up was because when I was 19, I started training in Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was 21, I was living in the school and running it as a senior instructor. Mm-hmm. And so as far as I was concerned, at 21, my life was, I'm set. I have a home.
Right.
I have a surrogate family. I'm respected in town. Everyone knows who I am. No one fucks with me. I love what I do.
Mhm.
I'm teaching 7, 8, 9, 10 classes a week every day. I'm loving it, right? And as far as I was concerned, I'm set until I'm 90. And then drama happens, there's crisis, and all of it gets taken away beyond my control. It was like my own personal COVID at 21. And it was fucked. It was raw. I didn't have the capacity to manage it. I was like the prince who was thrown out of the kingdom and exiled, and no one will talk to you again, and had to literally rebuild from scratch. So in terms of having an identity and a home and a role and a career, lost all of it at a young age. And then, fell into acting college and c'est la vie. But I guess that's why it's interesting and kind of a curiosity to me when, things like not just COVID, but if we cycle back to 2008, global financial crisis.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
there's wars going on in Europe right now. So this isn't to be doom and gloom. This is to illustrate change, disruption will always occur. And it will always, and this is on a grand scale, like personally, you will go through breakups, you will get fired, you will have to move house, so, and all of these are intertwined with the work you do, how you want to do it, who you want to work with, the kind of life. I guess the question we're really asking here is, what's the kind of life you want to build for yourself?
Yeah.
Not just the career. So that's my soapbox moment. I'll let you actually answer the question that I posed to you earlier.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's just interesting. You said that, and I seriously, for a half second, I did. I put myself in that spot, and I was like, wow, not a place I'm willing to go, I guess, And it's funny because in all reality sense, I kind of had the same thing happen over, the last year. My mother was diagnosed with, type 4 ovarian cancer, terminal.
Yeah.
Rough news, so it kind of threw me off, and I let it, you know what I mean? I let it. And when it first happened, I felt I had some safety net, so I was going to take a break and relax. And, I lost a lot of clients, lost a lot of work in that time. And it's interesting. You have to ask yourself, do I now pursue something else? Or do I come back to this with some shred of dignity and try to make this work for a second time, and that's what I did. I saw the value in it. I knew those pieces that I talked about with education and, how much passion I put behind what I do in this. And what I told myself, honestly, I mean, maybe it's not practical, but I said there's no other option. This is me. I have figured it out. I'm lucky enough to know that and have that piece about me. And it's still, like you said, it's a vertical market. I mean, this thing's not going away. You're not getting rid of marketing. You're not getting rid of social media. So it was on me at that point, and I knew that, and I took identity in that. And over the last probably 6 months, I've really grounded myself in that kind of struggle that we're talking about, finding that purpose again. And because I found it and I am so passionate about it, it has anchored me through that time.
That's a good point. In terms of, you'll often hear guys like us talk about passion in your work. Like commonly, it was thrown around a lot in the sort of mid 2000s. I don't know if the sheen's worn off it yet, but I guess, look, if like younger you, or even like talking to like younger members in the audience, like, do you find the passion first and pursue the gig, or do you pursue the gigs in order to find your passion? Because what we talked about in the pilot briefly was, I mean, you don't know. 1920, like, it's like you walk out into the buffet, you've never tasted anything. So what do I like? I don't know. You kind of have to try a whole bunch of shit. you know, to figure out where you sit, how you feel, like whether your skills apply here, whether you want to put up with the politics. So I guess, yeah, I mean,
So,
there's a question. Like, do you find your passion first and say, okay, are you Brody, who is a marketer, or are you the marketing guy? You know,
yeah, I
because
do. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that kind of makes me want to ask you about, the stuff with acting, like
yeah, yeah,
what was that for you? Because I feel like that has to be, you have to be very passionate about that field to enter. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's not like you can't like softcore be like, I want to be an actor, Nah.
No.
And
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can if you're an influencer these days.
yeah, okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
you don't have to train just like kind of crazy as an actor. But yeah, okay. To your point, yes, you do have to be driven to a point. And look, trust me, like artists and actors like are just as bad as any other profession, and like so fucking ego driven. So like I am so special, I am so this and that. And, like no one gives a fuck. Like once you get out into the real world, start getting knocked back for auditions.
Hmm.
Then you'll figure out how much you weigh. And so like Australia is a very different landscape to the States, like very, very different landscape in terms of like available work. And just for fun, for people who don't know, like let's say like your typical audition, let's say you have one a month, let's say, for instance.
Okay.
Your agent gets you decent commercials or shows or whatever. You get the brief, they'll email you the day before saying, hey, tomorrow go here. So whatever you've got scheduled for tomorrow, you have to move it because they're not accommodating you. So you go to the casting agency, whoever happens to be at the time. You've probably maybe got a script, maybe got a brief, maybe you'll have to improv. You don't know. You'll have right. So for context, you're going into an interview. You don't know who you're meeting. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not really sure what the role is. For context, you get there. You'll meet the casting agent. You might meet someone who's associated with the ad or the show, maybe. So you'll do the scene or do some improv. You'll generally do 2 or 3 takes because they're like, great, we've done the interview that way. Now I want you to do the interview in a completely different way. And then we want to do the interview in a completely different way again. So give me 3 versions of the same interview, right? And so I can already see like all the corporates at home going, the fuck is this? I'm like, yeah, this is, and I got this yesterday.
Yeah.
And you got to turn it on. Yeah. Oh, you want a French accent? Okay. And then you'll do it, and then you'll walk out, and you'll never hear from them again. And right, but it's this thing, and this is sort of, it's not. People go, oh, you've got to have a thick skin and everything else. I'm like, no, it's kind of like the craft is kind of like professional discipline. Like you walk in, you go from 0 to 100, and then back down to 0, because I know I have no control over this process. And unlike interviews where, oh, you've got experience, oh, you've got skills, oh, you've come from here, these things weigh in. For most auditions, whether it's film or theater, you're judged on how you look.
Right.
So is this face going to represent middle-aged, or mixed race, or and this is where I seem to fall between the cracks, because I'm not Caucasian enough in Australia to play like on Neighbours and on a soap, and I'm not ethnic enough to tick that box either.
Oh my God.
And even though I like got the skills and experience and all this other stuff, and again, like I have no explanation. I could bore you with a million stories of ads I didn't get for who they cast, but that's we'll save that for another time. But to your point about passion driving this thing, right? Let's say you did this for a year. That's 12 auditions, 12 job interviews that you didn't get.
Yeah.
They brought you in. They might even bring you back for a second one, and you didn't get.
Well, so that poses another question for me. What did that for you personally even do? God, that would, because I'll say for me right now, that would obscure my connection to doing that. It would be so hard, it's
tricky because you need to, like, and I'm sure everyone's gone through this in their own way, but are you going to balance the rejection? Are you going to, and what's worse than rejection is just silence.
Right.
That's worse. Like getting called for something and not getting it. Fuck yeah, that sucks. Silence, not getting called at all.
Yeah.
Not getting work,
worse.
Not getting requested, the worst. So what I mean, like, this is all in retrospect. Like, obviously I was driven because I'm like, well, if I'm not getting cast, I'm going to write my own stuff. And that's what drove me, because I hate lazy actors. Everyone in Australia complains about the industry. Everyone says, oh, you've got to go to LA. Everyone complains about this and that. I'm like, well, fuck you. Like, be the change.
Right.
Theater is at least grassroots. I'll get in there. You know what I mean? So, and that was, a skill and a craft that I had to develop. So in my case, it would be fair to say that the passion came first.
Okay.
For whatever it happened to be, right? And the passion drove the training. The passion still drives the career. Like, I do less acting, but all of the skills I've acquired, including writing, performance, production, and everything in between, obviously goes into podcast, goes into video production, goes into all the stuff that I create, and the creative skill sets that I sharpen to work with clients.
Right.
Like the film and theater is the outcome, but you can turn creative problem solving and abstract intelligence, to data analysis.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we'll get to that much later. Yeah. And this is how I find myself in this very weird, very particular niche, because I finally, having done, all the odd jobs and same like 15 years of hopscotch between corporate and creative, passion's driven most of it.
Yeah.
Because you try it for a bit and go, not for me. Try the 9 to 5, not for me. Tech startups, actually, this isn't the culture that you hyped, not for me. And I guess that's a certain temperament as well, because from the outside, people might look at that and go, you're inconsistent. For others, for you and I, or people who think a bit more deeply about it, it's like, no, like, should I stay somewhere where you're miserable and it affects your mental health and your day-to-day for years? That's the trade-off.
Yeah.
So it's that analogy of like, not all who wander are lost. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel fortunate now that I finally built myself a little platform where I can actually bring all of the elements of who I am and what I've done into one place. And the sum total, the outcome is greater than the sum total of their parts.
Yep. And
that's such a relieving feeling. Similar, having searched for where you fit for such a long time, and then finally kind of creating your own little house of straw and going, well, this is quite comfy and I like it.
Yeah, right.
It might get blown down, and COVID did, but
yeah,
I can always, straw is pretty easy to build another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
That's an awfully long explanation, isn't it?
No, I like that though. I mean, and it got me thinking too, circling back to if I had to put myself in the perspective of losing this again, it's nice, like you said, to have gone back on yourself and realize you have played a little bit of hopscotch, but that is why you do have the perspective you have, and in the center that you have, because again, we know what we don't want to do, we know what we do want to do, and within that too, there's a whole scope of things that we can settle for doing if we have to. You know what I mean? And as much as that sounds like a bad thing, it's not. Because we all have to make ends meet. We all have a bottom line.
We all need stability at some point. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
No, and it goes into this too. At some point you do have to sacrifice or redefine a little bit of that passion for yourself. You know what I mean? Because again, if you want to look at it in reality's terms, I do a lot of back end work that maybe that's not what I'm so passionate about, but it correlates and translates into what I'm doing and the overall picture. And if I didn't have that perspective, I'd probably still be an unhappy guy, So I'm glad, yeah, that I played a little bit of hopscotch too. I was, fishing, cannery, construction, retail, sales, and it's so funny, man. It's so funny that you were talking about that with acting. Where at the interviews, it's almost like it reminded me of my first sales gig, door to door sales gig, selling for Kirby
Bro.
vacuums, and
Wow, you were a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman.
yes, I was.
Wow,
Yes, I
you
was.
don't get much more cliche than that. You don't get.
No, no, you don't. And no, I mean
Wow.
that's the thing. You face large scale rejection, and
Yeah. I couldn't do it straight up. Like I could never do sales in any capacity. Like actors have agents. I could never. Makes me icky. Can't do it.
yeah, no, and then but it's funny too because then it made me think in that instance where I'm like, oh, I'm not door knocking anymore, right? But I sell my services. I sell myself. I build my brand and my personal image. I'm just door knocking now in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever step outside of that if you are trying to grow or branch out or, trying to
Yeah.
expand. It's not practical to not knock on some doors,
Here's a question then, because I'm sure this is something that crosses all of our minds, especially early on. Like, what's our take on those who just chase that bag, bro? Like,
Hustle culture?
I'm well, kind of, or like, but I'm gonna choose the career that's gonna earn me the prestige, that's gonna earn me like the six figures in the least amount of time. It's gonna earn me, you know,
Like
that
lawyers who
like
go into law without, care of what they're doing.
yeah, potentially.
Uh,
And or just or like or that as a motivator, as a primary motivator, because like we've talked about passion here, and that's great. There's going to be a school of people listening to us now who's like, yeah, but man, like I do want to build something that costs money. So if I'm trading my time for money, then is that wrong? Like, because and it ties in a little bit to what you're saying about marketing. Is like, why are you marketing yourself and other people? Is to attract sales, to get the revenue, to make profit, to build a business. Like, there's economics behind this. We all pay rent. If you have more income, it's easier to pay rent. And pay bills, and I don't
right.
have to worry about like what groceries I'm buying.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just kind of comes down to what we are talking about and being able to identify it, right? So I mean, that's the thing. Some people do go through an experience where they spend 25 years somewhere they're not passionate about. And, I don't know if you lose touch with that voice or, that changes,
Mm.
drastically enough to where you can't recognize but for me, it just comes down to identifying. So if you have that one solitary piece, right, it is extremely hard to ignore that, especially in someone that's self-aware. You go to
Right.
work and you start to feel that creeping feeling. I want to be doing something else. I so badly wish I knew what that was even. You know what I mean?
Right. So that self-aware thing, that's the gem,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I seldom have I ever heard of a story or met anyone who was working in a career, happy or unhappy, working in the career that made bank, and then when they sort of became self-aware of like what was troubling them, still said, "I'm going to double down and make more bank."
Right, right,
So
yeah,
that,
no.
right? Like we'll talk to Tony Albrecht later, because that's sort of his story, and it was the opposite. It's that classic, I need a shift in career, and what that
Hmm.
is. Another sort of story of a friend of mine, and this is a couple who were in their 20s, like probably mid 20s, and she's Czech and like a yoga instructor, and I met her while she was working in a cafe. Lovely, lovely girl. Her partner is in law, corporate law, contracting, and all that sort of stuff. Like, so high up, but he's
Hmm.
looking to make partner, like youngest partner, probably before 30, unheard of, but like can provide the lifestyle. And it's interesting because she's Czech and she's over here, and so proving a de facto visa is sort of something as well. So having a stable relationship is sort of key for them at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when you sort of peel back behind the facade, COVID was rough for them because bro was still working from home and just developed a massive drinking habit.
Oh,
And mid-20s.
yeah.
And was already overweight, and I had put on a ton of weight. Like he used to be kind of our build, probably like a bit heavier, and I had put on a gut. And she was kind of telling him like, "I love you, but this isn't healthy, and if I met you now, I wouldn't find it attractive." And this is like mid-20s,
Which is a fair statement to make.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It is,
Mm-hmm.
it is. But this is what I don't think when it comes to self-awareness. And for those of us that like get driven by the finances at times, that comes with a cost. Like, are you aware of the time that you're going to put in? Are you aware of the sacrifices in the relationship that you're going to make? Are you aware of like the impact it's going to have on your mental and physical health? Like, not that any of this is wrong. They're factors to be considered.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a trade-off all the way along the line of like, if I take the carrot now, it spares me the stick, but
Yeah.
and that's what terrified me actually, because they were mid to late 20s, and she was talking like they'd been married for 30 years and they were 50, 60, because those were the problems they were having. And she'd come home at 3:00 in the afternoon. He's passed out on the couch with a bottle of wine next to him. They haven't had sex in weeks because like all this sort of stuff. So, and here's a guy, this is what I mean about this self-awareness. Here's a guy that was obviously driven to provide, and she also loved that about him. Like that's what he wants to do. He's working hard now to get us set up so we can have kids, and then I can relax and all of that. But where do you draw the line?
Right.
Like, is it with heart attack number 1? Is it with the cold sweats? Is it with, or do you develop this self-awareness from somewhere? And normally that reflection comes from crisis or change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a weird kind of perspective to set yourself into, especially as a father of 4. You know what I mean? Because you got to ask yourself. At least I do as a parent. I ask myself that constantly. As in retrospect, for what I'm gaining in the next 10 to 15, what am I losing in the immediate 5? Right. I saw this thing the other day, and it was a quote. Your kids will always be your kids, but your kids will only be small once. It smacked me right in the face. Because especially with my youngest, my last, potentially my last child, it's gone by too fast. I've found myself in the last 5 years, and I've anchored myself in that, and within that there has been 10, 12, 14-hour days. There has been long weekends and traveling, and so yeah, it's an interesting question to ask, because again, even if you've identified that, if you are truly self-aware, like you said, there are consequences to any movement, and maybe not so consequences in the looming sense, but yeah, for me, at least, you know what I mean? I lose out on time. That's a consequence. Like that's a real bummer. Did I gain monetary value? Did I establish a little bit more career expertise? And again, which is frustrating because those things do and are driven by passion. But in comparison to the passion I have for my family or for my kids, it's it's a weird thing to put it up against.
Do you think that you can find your identity and your purpose through work? Maybe, acting is kind of an example, but like if you look at certain tradesmen, or you look at someone who's a nurse, and I guess it's is it a passion where they're drawn to a field, they're drawn to like a calling to either do something with their hands or to work with people or to work with children or whatever, or is it sort of you know you fall into this role sort of by accident and then find yourself really thriving in it and creating new space? Um,
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I think I'm still evolving that for myself as we go.
yeah, I do too, and I don't think you could really ask anybody, and the
Mm,
answer would be the same, uh, which is beautiful and confusing at the same time. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost like to each person, whether it's circumstance or experience or whatever it is that helps you identify that piece. It does seem to be different for everyone, right? It's like you said, some people can be in Fred Meyer's grocery and work in the grocery, and then something
yeah, yeah.
for them strikes that level of passion, and they find it, and they move through the ladder, and they build a home, and whatever it is, and that.
See, if I asked my old man, I don't think he would know. If I asked him, because he's an engineer and he went from like Navy into electrical engineering and then power plants and then X, Y, and Z. And if I asked him, Glenn, does it define your identity? Are you an engineer? Are you passionate? I don't think I've ever seen him passionate about anything in his life, like, except for family. Now, here's the thing: like that's for him, it was like work was work was an objective space and a chore. It was something that had to be done, and it was separate from, let's say, family.
Yeah, yeah,
So for him, in my view, for him, it's like, well, passion is for family and weekends, and work is work, and it's a chore to put up with. Which, even at a young age, for me, was terrifying because we spend an awful lot of our life at said job.
yeah,
And the thing is, it doesn't, like we've talked about this, it doesn't exist in isolation. Like whenever he'd come home at 4, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, he's not happy.
no.
And it's not like I did a good job today and I like working with the boys. None of that. It was a chore to be endured.
Yeah, no, and we have had this discussion, and it's the same thing. And with my father, he went to college, university, studied, had good grades, all American
Mhm.
athlete, was doing the thing, and then identified with the boiler industry, and
Right, right, right.
kind of followed that path and that corporate ladder. And and I've had some discussions with him that have kind of evolved how I've felt about that. So the bias has changed, but it's very creepy how similar our stories are. When he'd come home, a big part of what, I would see, and it's interesting. It's interesting. A
Mm,
big part of what I would see is that same stuff. This is hard.
right.
This is a struggle. I'm stressed out. Work is work. I got to go get it done. And he's very efficient at it, very successful, very good at
Mhm.
it. Um, but now, having had these conversations and kind of gaining perspective from him, it's like we're talking about, he kind of aligned himself with the work that was there and found the passion in it. And when he came home, that was his space to let go of the things that didn't align with that passion, didn't
Interesting.
feel good. And yeah, we had a conversation a couple days ago that just completely shifted my perspective of it. And I think you can find, like, to answer your question, I think you can find the passion in the work. It's just, do you compartmentalize and square those away, or do you try to blend them all together? What's the best
Yeah,
approach there, right? Because I think for him, he compartmentalized. I got work, and I'm
yep,
going to feel good and fulfilled if I, meet my milestones and
yeah,
achievements,
yeah,
and that's wonderful. And he's done a fantastic job. And
yep,
then he compartmentalized with family. And like you said with your father, I think one of the most, apparent times that I saw my father happy and passionate was when it had to do with us, whether it was
yeah, yeah,
vacation or just spending time at home, working on the house, whatever it may
yeah,
be, and that's kind of to open your question up to a second layer is, where does that stem from? Is that work, or
Yeah.
is it something else?
See, I think my brother's another example where I think it falls somewhere in the middle. Like he's in IT, so again, like will never be out of work. Could
Hmm.
work anywhere in the world.
Hmm.
Um, he- Early, I'm trying to think of. I might get the timeline wrong, but the moral will still be the same. But before he met his current partner, he had the opportunity to go down to a school and learn to fly planes.
Wow,
And
nice.
that's right. And that's always sort of been like to get his pilot license, to get his hours up, to then tease that career path.
Hmm.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
And he was into it. He really was. Like he lit up whenever you talked about it. He's like, yeah, 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 yeah. And I was flying this single engine and whatever, and I took it around and touched down to it, and like, really, really lights up when he talks about it. And then I think that relationship might have ended, and he found himself, and so that dream. No, he had the opportunity. He was with someone at the time. He had the opportunity to go down. He played with it a little bit, and then it came the crunch time of like, I will have to move down to take this gig to do this, and he, with the partner he was with, they decided no. So that
Gotcha.
dream
Yeah.
kind of died. And fast forward, let's say about 10 years, he's now down in Tasmania, still working in IT, but now he's repicked up like casual, like little flying lessons. And again, you can kind of see him come to life. And I guess it's this, like, here's the philosophical thing, because like if this was a movie or if everyone was me, they go, bro, fly planes. That's what makes you know. That's what
Right.
makes you happy. That's what makes you happy.
Right.
Like you light up. You're all about it. You're telling me this story the other day about like how you're doing like touchdowns and takeoffs, and you did three fine, and then you fucked the fourth one and buckled the front window, and you're like, oh shit, but you still went back next week. You know what I mean? So you didn't. It's cool when it's easy, and when you fuck up, if you still commit, then you've really got something. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
the
Yep.
passion's there, right? And so everyone's like, dude, they fly planes. But like, he's with a different girl now. They've got a mortgage. They've just bought their first house. They've got a mortgage, right? So, you know, um, that's the reality. And so part of I guess everyone is like, just fucking fly planes and be happy. Just commit
Yeah.
to that shit rather than it's a little better now because he was working with one organization that he just like fucking killed his soul and he was dying, and like a lot of politics and a lot of admin and all that sort of shit. He seems to be in a better role now, with a bit more autonomy and working with a sustainable green energy company, which is really fucking cool. But he's still got some cursory health issues, I would think, like drinks too much, smokes too much, medicates with a lot of things he shouldn't, which probably testifies to like a deeper sort of unhappiness, right? And that's the creeping cancer, I think, that affects a lot of generations and they're probably just not aware of.
Yeah.
It's like committing. Who was it that said? I don't know if one philosopher has said like habit is you are the sum of your daily habits or something like that.
Yep.
You can think you are whoever you think you are, but what you habitually do actually defines the kind of human that you are. And so when you look at like the routines we put ourselves through at work and certain cultures and individuals and politics and organizations and administration, seldom of which is very humane, that's got a cost. So does that come out in relationships? Does that come out in drinking? Does that come out in mental health? Does that come
Mm,
out in other substance abuse, sort of issues?
yeah.
And to guys like you, like how does that reflect to your kids?
Right.
Because you're not an island, don't, like my old man, don't come home and think like, well, job's done, now I'm family. Like it crosses
Yes.
over.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing too. That's where I think it was really beautiful, where I've started to get an understanding of my father, and coming home
Mm.
and having that space to, let go of it. Because, like I said, he was invested on the, family side. And I think if I were to compartmentalize too, and try to act like, me spending 10 hours in an office 10, 15 feet away from my family all day isn't a
Yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
I'm doing a disservice to everybody. I'm
Yep.
dishonest to them, and then I'm doing a disservice to myself because I have no one that I'm sharing with. And yeah, no, that's a very good question. I would not have an answer for you. It does,
That's cool.
yeah, no, and it does. It kind of opens that up, right? How much of sacrificing that passion or that value that we're trying to find does it actually cost?
To I get to summarize in a way, I know to give it a mental health perspective, something my psych offers routinely is that a big condition for a lot of us, or just in the state of human life, is to be engaged in meaningful work
Right.
is a prime indicator of our happiness, of our productivity in the best sense of the word, in our mental state. You know what I mean? To be engaged in meaningful work,
Yeah.
whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
And if you guys at home are listening, you're probably getting an idea that, neither Brody or I have all this figured out. And that's kind of the point. Like, we want to have these discussions openly with you guys, to show you, like, it's not the Insta, it's not the LinkedIn, it's not, subscribe to my newsletter and earn six figures overnight. It's all bullshit. Like, and all of this, and so what, man? Like, how about your relationship with your kids? How about your relationship with your partner? How are you? Can you sleep at night?
Yes.
Like, how are you on a
Yes.
day? How are you on a day to day? Like, life is bigger than your fucking gig,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And so to be engaged in meaningful work, I get all these things we've touched on, like this self-awareness. Like, what is that for you? Like, what's going to be meaningful for you, and what's meaningful for you now might not carry through for like 6 months or a year, and that's cool, man.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, totally. That's totally cool. And if
Yeah.
you've got to suck it up to pay those bills now, that's cool, man.
Yeah, that's okay.
No one's judging that. It's about giving yourself permission, to ask those questions and be your own guide.
Yes.
I think, there we go. Well, that's the takeaway for today. Like, be your own guide and, like, trust yourself on this journey.
And yes, you do have the permission. You do. You absolutely do.
Exceptional. That's not bad for the first episode.
No, I like that a lot. Yeah,
that's not bad. That's not bad. All right. So coming up next, actually, I've got to check the drive. I think I know what we're talking about. I think we're talking about AI.
Yes, sir.
The rise in AI
Because I'm excited
professional
about
spaces.
that one.
It's a hot topic.
I know. Well,
it's a hot topic.
So it's a trending topic,
especially in your world. Because
right.
Like, AI is going to take all your jobs, bro.
No, it's not. Come on now.
ChatGPT, Midjourney. We're never going to need you again.
No, don't say that.
We're not going to need any of the artists. Yeah. So that's next episode, ladies and gents. We're having this discussion on AI and content creation. Like, what is it? What's the actual effects? How can we use it? Is it a tool, or is it using us? All these sorts of things. It's a hot topic right now. I have very particular views. I know Brody has very particular views on this subject. Can you foresee any spicy topics coming up for next episode, Brody?
Yes, I'm excited to see both of our true colors kind of shine in this.
They might listen to this first episode and then they'll tap out by the second. Controversial.
They might, but that's all right. That's okay.
It's spicy and sweet.
Yeah, I think it's going to be spicy. I think it's going to be eye-opening.
I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. So what's worked for you? Like, where did you start out? That's always a good one. Like, what's been your first job? What's been your most weird and wonderful job? Because Brody and I talked about this in the pilot. We'll probably share it as well in the comments. But we'd love to hear from you guys. And also coming up, what are your thoughts on AI and content creation and for the future of media? But in the meantime, you stay classy, Misfits.